Welcome to the Social and Behavior Change Business Case Model for Family Planning, an interactive tool. This is built on Breakthrough Research's business case for investing in social and behavior change for family planning, where we synthesize the literature on SBC impact for FP, as well as the costs of interventions. And when we scale this up, looking at different contexts and look at determinations of cost effectiveness. This report showed that SBC can be highly cost effective in different contexts, and now this can be used for your particular program for exploring different scenarios. So we start by clicking on Begin. So there are 6 main steps to using this tool, which you can see them aligned across the top here. Not all the inputs are required. You can see that those that are required are noted in red here, saying required. And the first required step is to pick the country out of our list of 31 countries. So for our example, we're going to choose Mozambique. This defaults to doing a national analysis, but one could also, if they're planning a subnational approach, they could choose subnational, enter the area, and then enter the proportion of the population that's in this area. So maybe this would be northern Mozambique with whatever the population proportion is. For our purposes, we're going to keep it at national. And that next required step then is to specify what year you want this model to start. So in this example, I'm going to choose 2024, and these work on a 5-year projection. So it'll automatically go to 2028. Next, moving down, it will show you the default values that we have. These are data specific now to Mozambique in terms of the number of women of reproductive age in the country based on the UN population division, the mean ideal number of children based on the most recent DHS, and the MCPR, also from the UN population division. If you have better data, let's say you have an updated estimate on the mean ideal number of children, you can make changes here. So maybe as an example, just illustrative, maybe this is now 5.2. And you can see that that has turned green. For our purposes now, we'll click on this green button to restore default values, but we just wanted to show you that functionality. Once you reviewed those, made any changes, then you can click Next. The second step is to review the SBC effectiveness odds ratios. No inputs are required on this page. However, you can review the SBC effectiveness odds ratios that are based on the synthesis of the literature on SBC impact in low and middle income countries for family planning. For more information, you can click on this information box and it'll explain more about the odds ratios and the 3 links that they're exploring. There's one set of odds ratios that look at the relationship between different types of SBC interventions, mass media, mobile SMS, and different types of IPC, and the relationship with intermediate outcomes, such as attitude, self-efficacy, and communication. So the second group looks at the relationship between these intermediate outcomes and modern contraceptive use. And finally, that third set of odds ratios are looking at that direct relationship. So you can leave these literature review odds ratios here. If, however, you had an example where you were looking at a specific program, maybe you already had a pilot and you knew the relationship between, let's say, your IPC and MCPR, and you knew your odds ratios was, 2.2. You could put something like that in, it would change, and then that would carry through. So if you're trying to test it for your specific intervention, this can be customized in that way. We encourage you to use the median odds ratio initially, but if you want to come back later and explore different sensitivity analysis, you can pull up the ones from the first quartile or the third quartile to look at a range of outcomes later. So I'm going to restore this default values as we did before. So you can see now that those changes have gone away, but we'll move on to the next step. In this third step, we look at the unit costs. Again, this is taken from a synthesis of the literature on SBC intervention costs, which have been adjusted to 2020 US dollars. No inputs are required on this. However, if you do have program-specific information on how much your intervention costs, you can make those changes. So for example, if I was doing a live drama and I knew that it cost 55 cents per person exposed, I could make those changes there. Again, I'm going to restore the defaults. In addition, we have the service delivery costs. These are regional, and they're based on the Adding It Up 2019 report and adjusted for 2020 US dollars. You can make changes here as well if you wish. So that's all that's required on this page. Then you can click Next. So now we're on step 4, where we specify intervention reach. And this is really where the user input is most critical, because we need to specify how many people are going to be exposed to each intervention each year. And to do that, we have some built-in help. You can always click on the info icons for more information about what we mean by the different selections you can make. To start off, we want to think about how are we going to input this data, and we have 3 options. If we know how many women we're planning on reaching each year for each intervention that we're planning, we can just enter that in manually. If we don't know that, but we know how many people we plan to be reaching by year 5, we can enter in the year 5 values. Or alternatively, if we know how many people we plan to reach overall, we can specify the cumulative reach over 5 years. So for our demonstration purposes, we'll choose this last one. Next, we want to say, well, how are we going to be scaling up? And there are, again, 3 options: an S-shaped curve, which means we're going to start gradual, then build up and level off by year 5. Or we could have a linear, where we're increasing the same rate each year, and then constant, where it's going to be the same number of people each year. Most logically, we're going to choose the S-shaped curve in this example. And then if you need further help in trying to figure how many people you're going to reach, we have these little Help Set Values button, and which can support you. You can choose your intervention, and you can do different things like specify your media spots, how many people you plan on listening, and it'll help give you estimates of your reach. So we have this for the different types of interventions if that's something you want to utilize. So in this example, I'm going to say that we have a radio program that by year 5, we're going to reach, let's say, 5 million women. Additionally, I'm going to say we're going to have a live drama that accompanies this, and it's going to reach an additional 1 million. Finally, there's going to be some IPC. This will be at a smaller scale, but we're going to have some individual IPC reaching 50,000 women, and some group IPC reaching 75,000. So this is an example of a package of different types of interventions. It's not just one, but it doesn't have to be all of them either, of course. So you choose your intervention that you're using and the number of reach. And you can see when I added in the cumulative reach, assuming this S-shaped scale up, it created those values. If you wanted to make further edits to this, you could say edit your values, and then you could make changes if you wanted to adapt these. I'm going to keep my values here. So that's really what's required here. It takes a lot of time and thought to kind of figure this out, but like I said, we have tools embedded to assist you. Then you click Next. So now we're to step 5, which is the sense check. There are no inputs required for this particular step, but it allows you to evaluate whether your inputs in the previous step are feasible and practical given your budget or existing survey data on what is known about technology ownership, etc. So for example here, we've estimated reach to 5 million women with radio, and that represents 20% of the women of reproductive age. When we compare that to the percent of women owning a radio, or the percent of women accessing media via radio, we can see that that is a feasible goal. If we were planning on reaching 80% instead of 20%, then we might want to reconsider and go back and change our inputs. Additionally, we can check the total costs and see if these are in line with what our budgeting is. So these are some of the questions you can answer by understanding the proportion of women that you're reaching. You can have a better sense of the feasibility. Once you're satisfied with your results, you can click Next. If you're not satisfied, you can click back and go back to that step 4. So I'm going to click Next here. So now we've come to our final step, which is reviewing our impact and cost effectiveness results. You can see here, we start with a bar chart, which shows us our MCPR initially, and then our increase expected due to our SBC investments. It'll tell you the additional number of FP users, the number of unintended pregnancies averted, and the number of maternal disability adjusted life years averted over 5 years. Additionally, if you want more detail, it'll tell you where the relative contribution of your different interventions are coming from, as well as the relative contribution changes based on the intermediate determinants. Additionally, you can see the results in this bar chart showing how the interventions are influencing the different determinants, which have an overall impact on MCPR. So those are your impact results. If you click up here on cost effectiveness results, it will tell you your estimated costs, as well as your cost per additional FP user, cost per unintended pregnancy averted, the cost per maternal death averted, and then finally your estimated cost per maternal disability adjusted life year averted. And when we look at the cost per DALY averted, we can compare it to the GDP per capita to get our estimate on cost effectiveness. We use the thresholds provided by the WHO, where anything that's less than the GDP per capita is considered highly cost effective, and anything between 1 times the GDP per capita and 3 times the GDP per capita is considered cost effective. So you can see here in this example that using the national benchmark for Mozambique, our result of $838 per DALY averted is considered cost effective. If we wanted to use a regional approach, in this case looking at sub-Saharan Africa, excluding high-income countries, we can now see that it's determined to be highly cost effective because our threshold has gone higher. So these types of results can then be used for advocacy. It can also be used for planning. Maybe you want to try different combinations to see which type of intervention combination is expected to be most cost effective. So that concludes our walkthrough of this tool. We thank you very much for your attention and feel free to reach out if you have further questions. Thank you very much.